Okay, so this is the next part. We're going to go through. This is from on Instructables, created by what's his name? Nate, Mr. Nate Eastland created this, and this is the thing I used kind of as a basis of creating Petalinux. And so the first thing, what we're going to do is he recommends you run this. And the first thing you have to do, he has you run this to reconfigure your window in Dash. And let's see here. Do I have the right one? Nope. All right. So here we go. Now that's just a different shell. It lets you do what you. It lets you operate in Linux a little bit easier, I guess, for the purposes of so he has you source okay, so let me, what I'm going to do is find out where my sources and this is, now I'm assuming you've already installed Petalinux. What you want to do, this is very important, get the Petalinux for your version of Vivaldo. If you're using Vivaldo, what is it now, 2019.1, that's the Petalinux you want. That needs to match. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to copy this and bring up, actually I'm going to do this, do this in, let's see if, I'm not real familiar with gedit, but let's see if this works. I probably use Atom to do this, if I even did it. Alright, so since we're doing, so what they're telling you to do here is add the source command and you're going to add a settings command from Vivaldo. So let me go back and see where that is. Actually, I'm going to have to use in my other window here. Alright, so I happen to have Vivaldo under Tools. So I'm using 20, so this is going to be in, and it's settings 64.sh. So you need to do that. And let's save that. So let me point something out here. He does talk about where you get Petalinux. Now he did this with 2015.4. You're going to need, again, get the one that matches your version, and Zylinx. Let's look in it. Yeah. This. Yeah. So if you go to the link on this page, it'll take you to the version of Petalinux. So let's save that. And you're going to have to install a bunch that he lists the things you might need. All the different libraries and such that you're going to need, and it's typical. So here's the command sudo apt-get will get you all the libraries you need. But let's get into actually creating the project. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run these two things in my window to make sure that it's ready. I'm going to exit out of this and go back to this window here. Oh, this is the window, I think. Yep. No. Let's see which one we got here. Okay. So I'm going to run those two lines, and it's going to Alright, so everything's nice and ready now. And we're going to run, the first command we're going to run is the create. This will create a project. And what we're doing here is we're going to actually create the project from scratch. We're not using a pre-created one. And I ran into problems with the pre-created one. And this is actually pretty easy. So you're creating, it's in create, and you're creating a project. Since we're using the zinc, give it a name. So I'm just going to call it, let's see, new Peta. Alright. Hit return, it creates it. So now you have the project, new Peta. And you're going to go in. Next thing you got to do is configure it. And it's very easy. Okay, I think I found my problem. I am going to put this under this system. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go in and I can go to documents and then go up. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I needed to put, it said, doesn't have a hardware. So, hardware description. So this is, and I'm going to take this and copy that. I'm going to copy an HDF file that I'm trying to remember where, I think I generated it in the project. So that's one workaround, if you can't. I believe this is what I did. We'll go back home and go back to paste that in there. Under the hardware description. What I did is, let's go back to this, to the one you're actually looking at, and you can actually see. Okay, so if you can see here, my one that worked had a system.hf, and you notice it's a different date. So what I had done is I probably tried to create a project in Vivaldo with the Vivaldo tool, and I got a hardware description file out of that. This is why it may be easier to use a board definition file, or the board BSP, not definition, board support file. But let's go up here and let's go into project spec. Let's go into hardware. And you can see it right there. So now I'm going to go into new Peta. And my guess is when I do, it'll come up now. Yep, I'm thinking it will. There we go. Okay, I don't know, let me make sure you can see that. Yeah. Okay. Now what the instruction says here is that it says if you are using a Digilant, so fine, we can pretty much accept this. So we're going to do we just exit. And it's going to do a bunch of stuff. So you can see it's generating a bunch of things. And what we do next is we are going to actually boot up, we're going to build the project, package the project, and then what I'm going to try to do is actually bring up the Petalinux in this window. And that'll validate, if you will, our build. And then the next thing you need to do on there is you're going to actually take an SD card, you're going to create 2 partitions, and there are instructions here. Yeah, and he goes through this. So you're going to mount them, and I'll provide another link on how you do that. Now, this bit here with the update, I did not need to do that. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to build it and then try to run it once it's built. So what it's doing is it's getting all the information it needs. It is putting the whole thing together. So, but this is going to be necessary for, I believe we're going to need to use this to build the autonomous car. So, that is a kind of a cool thing to have this in Linux. As you know, if you're not a Linux user, it's quite. I'm very partial to it because it you don't have some of the stuff that you have with Windows where uh, where the programs can interfere with each other. They're all independent in and in the way the multi threading goes, it does not have to, you know, it's independent in that if one process gets hung, it's not going to can't hang the whole system. That's why they tend to stay up longer. You don't have to deal with that sort of thing. So let me go back here. Okay, it looks like it's successfully completed. I realized while this was doing it that I was not showing you the actual instructions. So let me just very quickly go through what we did before we get on to the next step, which is the build. First of all, first thing we did after we added the did the shell stuff, added the source and all that, is we ran Petalinux create, type project, template zinc, and we gave it a name which I think called new peta. Next thing we did is we went in and we had to configure it. So I ran Petalinux config. It did not work because I did not have a hardware description file. I basically borrowed one, as they say, from a project I created previously because I was playing around trying to create a project. So what I did is I had created a project. Let me see what I called it. I tried to create oh wait, I can do it by modified date and that'll tell me. So, Zybo BSP. I want to create a BSP. No, you don't want to do it that way. And I remembered in the SDK, you had, it did create a BSP, and I kind of looked around. Actually, what I did is, the easiest way to do that is I did a little search on hardware definition file. Yeah. Under my attempt to create a BSP. So I basically tried to create a Zybo project and didn't quite work. I went through another example that does work that we're going to have videos on. But under, why don't I show you? I think that would be the best way to do it. So what I did is I did, and I went into my attempt to create my own BSP. Zybo BSP. And I went into, let's see, where is it? I went into the SDK because that's where you, bsp.sdk, went in there, and you can see it was actually, we want the system. Where am I? I am in hardware, Zybo SDK, and then I went into design wrapper platform. If you look under here, you'll see system, and that was the 7th of September, 2217. And I believe this is the one I used. Let's see. Yep. So I grabbed that file and oh, that's a binary. So we don't want to do that. All right, so that's how I got around that problem with the config not working. So now the next thing we have to do is we have to actually package this thing. And to package it, I'm going to copy the command from the example, except that's probably not going to work real well. So we're going to have to, this is my modification because it's optional and we didn't have a bit file. We do not have a bit stream. So what we're going to do, get rid of that, and that should work. So it's saying, and that's fine. We go into images, Linux, and you can see we have boot bin, image, these three files, boot bin, image UB, and rootf are the three that we're going to end up when you create your micro SD. Boot bin and image UB are going to go in your in TFS, your Windows, where they talk about the first partition that you create, which is going to be your FAT. And the second, the last one, root fscpio, is the one that's going to go on your Linux partition. Just be aware of that when you create your SD card. So now we're back in the root and we're gonna see if we can get this thing to run. We are going to booting. So what we're going to do is we're going to boot the image with QEMU, which is basically simulation or There we go. Had to give it the kernel. And you can see it is now booting. And so it is now finding it, and you can see it's doing a typical Linux boot, and it's going to give you root, and the default on Petalinux when you first start it up is root. So that's how you get in. So now by doing this, I now verify that this thing in fact works. Now again, I had it, the guide that we used, Mr. Eastland's guide was excellent. Even if I had to tweak it a little bit to get it to actually work. There you go. So, and obviously if you're using this on a real system, you're going to create accounts, non-root accounts for the admins, and if you have users, because you do not want to do anything as you can see you have all your typical Linux directories here. Home, and of course it's only root. So that is creating your Petalinux. Now again, once you have it verified, you're going to want to get your little SD card in there. You're going to want to format it, and there are guides, and I can put a link. If you're doing it on Linux, there are guides. I did it on Linux. There are also guides. You can also do it on Windows. I think the tool's called Escher that actually lets you do what you need to do. But for Linux, it's basically typical Unix commands to do it. Creating your partitions, making your directory. Creating your partitions. Your making your file systems, making your directories, and mounting them, and then copying the stuff over. So I'm going to put a link up to that. But as you can see, this is relatively, with the guides, relatively simple. I had to play a little trick here, and I am not sure why it did not just create that file. And of course, he does say using a BSP is easier. I ran into issues with the BSP. I tried to create with the BSP, and it did not like it. So, in fact, let me get out of here. I guess, let's see. See what happens if I log out. Okay, so I'm gonna have to be polite. You don't just turn off Linux systems. I was taught this way. Shut down dash home now, and that shuts down your Linux. But let me show you something. Let's get rid of the ls and change that to source. Now, if I go back, yeah, that's the problem I ran into. So I would go with this other method. If you run into that issue where the hardware definition file, go into Vivaldo, create a project for your Zybo, and there is a good example project. If you go through that first before you do this, and I have video, be putting up videos on that. If you do that and you go into the directories as I showed earlier, you will find the file that you need and just borrow it. I know it's kludgy, and probably something's changed since this gentleman did the guide a couple of years back, but as you can see, that workaround did work. So hopefully you got something out of this, and I will speak to you next time.